There's a kind of tiredness that does not come from effort. It doesn't arrive after a long day. It doesn't disappear after sleep. And it doesn't feel dramatic enough to alarm you. It simply exists, quietly, persistently, beneath everything you do. You carry it through conversations. You feel it while scrolling. You notice it in moments that should feel satisfying, but somehow don't. And because nothing is obviously wrong, you learn to accept it. This is the most dangerous kind of exhaustion, the kind that becomes invisible by feeling normal. You tell yourself it's just life, that responsibilities increase, that this is what being an adult feels like. But pause, not to rest, not to escape, just to notice. When was the last time you felt genuinely restored? Not distracted, not temporarily relieved, not numbed by stimulation. Restored. Most people can't answer that question because the fatigue they're carrying doesn't come from a single cause. It isn't tied to one stressful job, one bad habit, or one difficult season of life. There's no clear moment you can point to and say, this is where it started. It crept in gradually, quietly, and now it lives in the background of everything. Here is the paradox modern life doesn't teach you how to recognize. You live in the most comfortable, technologically advanced era in human history, yet you feel persistently depleted. Your ancestors faced hunger, danger, and physical hardship. They worked harder with fewer resources. And yet, something about your life feels heavier. How does that make sense? Why does a world designed to reduce effort leave you feeling drained? The answer isn't found in productivity advice. It isn't solved by better routines. And it isn't fixed by learning how to manage your energy. Because this tiredness doesn't come from what you do. It comes from what you are required to carry. Your attention, constantly fragmented and pulled. Your identity, constantly evaluated, adjusted, and compared. Your self-control, constantly engaged. Modern life does not exhaust you through intensity. It exhausts you through continuity. There is no clear beginning and no real end to its demands. No moment where effort fully stops. No psychological signal that says, you're done now. Even rest is conditional. Am I resting correctly? Am I wasting time? Should I be doing something more useful? So rest becomes another task, another thing to manage. Your nervous system never fully disengages. This is why sleep often feels shallow. Why weekends don't restore you. Why vacations feel shorter than they should. Sleep repairs the body, but it does not resolve unresolved mental tension. You're not living in danger, but you're never fully at ease either. Always slightly alert, always slightly behind, always responsible for something. And because this pressure is subtle, you don't resist it. You adapt. You normalize the fatigue. You lower your expectations. You accept a flatter version of life. This is why modern exhaustion doesn't look like collapse. It looks like functioning without depth. You still show up. You still perform. You still respond. But your inner world feels thinner. Your motivation fades faster. Your attention fractures more easily. You're not burned out. You're being taxed. A tax on attention. A tax on emotional regulation. A tax on constantly managing yourself in a world that never truly pauses. And the most unsettling part, because everyone around you feels the same way, this exhaustion becomes invisible. It stops being a warning signal. It becomes a shared condition. So instead of asking why you are tired, you ask how to cope with it, how to push through, how to optimize, how to survive more efficiently. But what if tiredness isn't the problem? What if it's a message? What if this fatigue is your mind telling you that the way you are required to live is psychologically unsustainable, even if it looks successful from the outside? Because the real question isn't, why am I always tired? The real question is, what is modern life quietly taking from me every single day that I never consciously agreed to give? And once you begin to see that hidden cost clearly, you can no longer treat your exhaustion as a personal failure. It becomes information. And information, when understood, demands change. The exhaustion you feel is not a flaw in your character. It is a psychological response to an environment that quietly violates the limits of the human mind. Modern life did not make you tired by asking you to work harder. It made you tired by asking you to remain available, mentally, emotionally, cognitively, at all times. Your nervous system was never designed for that. For most of human history, stress arrived in waves. A threat appeared. The body mobilized. The danger passed. The system returned to rest. Effort had edges. Responsibility had limits. Life moved in cycles. Modern life erased those cycles. What replaced them is a constant, low-grade demand. Not intense enough to trigger collapse, but persistent enough to prevent recovery. No clear threats. No clear endings. Just endless self-regulation. Carl Jung warned that when a person is forced to live behind too many roles, the psyche fragments. Not into madness, but into functions. One part acts. Another observes. Another evaluates. Another suppresses discomfort so life can continue smoothly. You're not just living your life. You're managing yourself inside it. You monitor your tone. You regulate your emotions. You adjust your identity depending on context. Every act of regulation costs energy, and modern life demands constant regulation. This is why you feel drained even on days when nothing happened. Because internally, something did happen. Your nervous system stayed engaged without release. Friedrich Nietzsche foresaw this condition when he warned about a future humanity obsessed with comfort and safety. He believed that avoiding intensity would not lead to peace, but to exhaustion. When life loses its peaks and valleys, tension has nowhere to go. It doesn't disappear. It accumulates. Arthur Schopenhauer argued that human suffering arises from endless desire. Modern life refined this suffering by keeping desire alive while denying resolution. You're constantly stimulated but rarely fulfilled, busy but unsatisfied, active but ungrounded. Neuroscience explains why this drains you so deeply. The brain consumes enormous energy when forced to make decisions, monitor outcomes, and switch attention. Modern life multiplies these demands endlessly, not through major choices, but through micro-decisions. Should I respond now or later? Should I care or detach? Should I push myself or rest? Should I stay available or protect my time? Each choice costs a small amount of energy. Over time, those costs compound. This is decision fatigue, and it doesn't require dramatic stress to take effect. Jean-Paul Sartre described humans as condemned to freedom, forced to define themselves through endless choice. In the modern world, this freedom becomes relentless. You're not just choosing actions, you're choosing who you are repeatedly under constant observation. Identity itself becomes labor. Aldous Huxley warned that future societies would not need oppression. Distraction would be enough. Silence would disappear, replaced by endless stimulation. And silence is where the nervous system recovers. Modern life dissolves silence gently. Notifications, information, comparison, noise that never fully stops. So even when you are alone, your mind remains occupied. Viktor Frankl observed that humans can endure almost any suffering except suffering without meaning. When effort is disconnected from purpose, energy collapses faster than the body can recover. Modern life often separates effort from meaning. You work without seeing the whole. You communicate without feeling deeply seen. You move constantly without arriving anywhere. So the psyche adapts. It dulls motivation. It flattens emotion. It lowers intensity to survive. This is not laziness. It is protection. Your mind is conserving energy in an environment that never truly allows rest, which is why your exhaustion feels different from ordinary tiredness. You're not tired from effort. You're tired from effort without closure. No saukelagike endings. No real pauses. No moment where responsibility fully drops. And because this condition is shared by nearly everyone, it becomes invisible. We call it stress. We call it adulthood. We call it reality. But normal does not mean natural. And when a condition becomes collective, it becomes harder to question. So instead of asking what kind of world produces this exhaustion, you ask what is wrong with you. Why can't I keep up? Why does rest never feel enough? Why do I feel drained all the time? But the problem is not your capacity. It is the hidden psychological tax built in a modern life. And once you recognize that tax, something shifts. You stop blaming yourself. And you begin to see how this exhaustion quietly reshapes everything else, your motivation, your emotions, your relationships, without ever asking permission. The most dangerous consequences of this exhaustion are not dramatic. They don't arrive as breakdowns. They don't feel like failure. They slip in quietly, disguised as normal changes in personality. When a nervous system is taxed continuously, it does not protest. It adapts. And adaptation reshapes perception without ever asking permission. One of the first shifts appears in motivation. You still want things, but the wanting feels muted. Every desire now carries a calculation. Is this worth the energy? So you begin choosing what costs the least, not what matters most. Not because you are lazy, but because your system is conserving fuel. Psychologically, this is survival. The brain learns that effort rarely leads to true resolution, so it limits output automatically. This is why modern exhaustion often looks like indifference, not sadness, not despair, just a quiet detachment from intensity. Another shift appears in relationships. Connection begins to feel demanding. Conversations drain faster. Emotional closeness feels heavy, not because you dislike people, but because you lack spare capacity. So you withdraw subtly. You reply slower. You share less. You avoid complexity. Without regular connection, the mind turns inward. Thoughts loop more frequently. Self-monitoring increases. Overthinking becomes automatic. This is why exhaustion and anxiety often coexist. Cognitive biases deepen. Negativity feels stronger. Ambiguity feels threatening. Silence feels unresolved. Your world does not become darker. It becomes narrower. Novelty feels costly. Familiarity feels safe. So life slowly contracts. Emotionally, joy becomes harder to access. Not because pleasure disappears, but because openness feels risky when energy is low. Even good things feel tiring. Celebration demands presence. Connection demands vulnerability. Meaning demands attention. And attention is already overdrawn. This leads to time distortion. When experiences lack emotional depth, days blur together. Time feels faster, not because life moves quickly, but because it lacks texture. Culture normalizes this and calls it maturity. But meaning erodes quietly. Frankl warned that when meaning fades, people do not collapse. They become empty. And emptiness is exhausting. So you distract yourself. Stay busy. Avoid silence. The cycle tightens until tiredness feels like identity. But it isn't. It is adaptation. And adaptation can be undone. The way out of this exhaustion does not begin with rest. That belief must collapse first. Rest, as modern life defines it, is only recovery, a pause, so you can return to the same draining structure again. It restores function, not vitality. Real rebellion begins earlier. It begins when you stop asking, "How do I get my energy back?" and start asking, "Why does my life require this much self-control just to feel stable?" Because the deepest drain on your energy is not effort. It is constant self-regulation. You are tired because you're always holding yourself together, editing reactions, containing emotions, maintaining composure. So rebellion starts with internal boundaries. Not every thought needs completion. Not every demand deserves response. This feels uncomfortable at first. Anxiety rises. But that discomfort is withdrawal, not danger. The second shift is restoring meaningful intensity. Modern exhaustion thrives on flatness. Endless moderate effort without emotional release. You don't need less effort. You need directed effort. Depth instead of dispersion. Commitment instead of constant availability. Nietzsche understood this. Passion does not drain energy, fragmentation does. The final shift is releasing constant self-surveillance. You stop watching yourself so closely. You act without narrating. You rest without justifying. And you restore silence. Not emptiness, but digestion. Moments where nothing new enters. This silence feels unsettling before it feels freeing. But beyond it, clarity returns. And clarity restores energy. At some point, the exhaustion stops asking for solutions. It asks for honesty. The ultimate truth is not that you need better habits, stronger discipline, or more rest. It is this: you're not tired because you are weak. You are tired because you're living without rhythm, without real beginnings, without real endings, without moments where effort fully stops and nothing is required of you, not even improvement. Modern life erased the edges. Work no longer ends. It bleeds into identity. Rest no longer restores. It becomes optimization. Meaning no longer settles. It turns into performance. So your nervous system never receives a clear signal of safety. It never hears, "You're done now." And a system that never finishes, never recovers. Carl Jung believed wholeness requires limits. A psyche without boundaries does not become free, it becomes exhausted. When everything matters, nothing nourishes. This is why efficiency never brings energy back. Efficiency accelerates life. But energy comes from integration, from finishing things, from resting inside completion, from allowing effort to end without guilt. Arthur Schopenhauer believed suffering came from endless striving. Modern life perfected this suffering. Constant motion without arrival. You're always preparing, always adjusting, always becoming, but rarely arriving. Viktor Frankl understood something essential. Meaning is not created by constant movement. It emerges when effort connects to purpose and when purpose is allowed to settle. This is the shift that changes everything. You stop asking how to get your energy back and start asking, what deserves my energy at all? You stop living as if every moment must justify itself. You stop treating rest as something that must be earned. You stop confusing exhaustion with adulthood. Slowly, your system begins to trust again. Your thoughts soften. Your attention stabilizes. Your inner world regains depth. Not because life became easier, but because it became contained. Contained effort creates intensity. Contained intensity creates meaning. Meaning creates energy. This is the rhythm modern life broke. And this is the rhythm you must rebuild. Not by escaping the world, but by refusing to let it drain you endlessly. Your fatigue was never the enemy. It was the message your nervous system sent when words were no longer enough. And now that you can hear it clearly, you don't have to live this way anymore.